What's good in the hood, YouTube? This is Crazy Samurai 71 here bringing you another video. So today I wanted to do a review of Power Rangers Dino Charge Episode 11, Breakout. Now, Breakout is a big episode. A lot of things happen in it, and it's a huge deal. Now, I wanted to talk about the episode as a whole and mention a bunch of different things, because there's some interesting things that they did with this episode. So, it starts off with Sledge looking at some footage of the Terrorzord being used by Fury. He sees how the use with what Fury's been able to accomplish, it hasn't gone that well, and he's not very happy with Fury. Fury, knowing that it hasn't gone well, and knowing that the Rangers do have the Energem now, he's not in the best position ever. Then we see a close-up, a video of Kendall explaining to people who are coming to see the Stone of Xandar, the story of the Stone of Xandar, which basically, it's explained that apparently 800 years ago, there was a knight named Sir Ivan, and there was a prince as well. And this knight was meant to protect Ivan. Ivan is the knight. This knight was meant to protect the prince. And the thing was that while they were out in the forest, Ivan spotted a stone in the water, and the stone was, for our knowledge, it was the gold Energem. So he picked it up, the prince wanted it, and then, while the prince had it, suddenly a monster attacked. So at that point, Sir Ivan, the knight, ended up fighting that monster. The monster was cloaked, and the thing was that they really didn't know what had happened at that point to Sir Ivan, and what had happened to that monster, or the Stone of Xandar, since it had gone missing. Well, actually, not the Stone of Xandar hadn't gone missing, but they hadn't been able to find it. Let's just say that much. Anyway, they had been able to find it, but they couldn't find Sir Ivan. Anyway, it was all a mystery, and no one knew what ever happened to Sir Ivan or the monster, and the story ended there. So, at that point, after that explanation was done, everyone was okay, it was all happy and everything, and when suddenly, this group of secret secret agent security kind of secret service group of people comes in limos to and they look all serious, and this is coming from outside, and Koda sees it, and Koda's like, what's going on here? At that point, we see these guys all dressed in black come in, and they start to confiscate all the artifacts, all the treasures of Xandar. And one thing I forgot to mention, I actually just realized this, is that you may be wondering, why is it called the Stone of Xandar? Well, the reason why is because the country that the prince and Ivan lived in and had power over was Xandar. That was the country's name. That's why the stone was called the Stone of Xandar. It was named after the country. So, anyway, what happened then is that they start to confiscate everything, including the gold Energem, which they think of as just the Stone of Xandar. And the person responsible for this and in charge of this whole entire operation is known as Prince Philip IV. Now, this is interesting, and I want to say this right away before I go further, is the fact that they say Prince Philip IV. Now, not everyone knows this, but it has been said in some of the recent episode summaries that Prince Philip is supposed to become the Graphite Ranger. So, when they said that, now it makes sense, because he is going to be the Graphite Ranger. This person that's trying to steal stuff, yeah, he's going to be the Graphite Ranger. So, let's hold off. Just want to mention that to you guys. Just to let you sink that in, that's going to be interesting. If you've seen this episode already, that's interesting to know. So, anyway, following this, he takes it, he's like, no one can hold this except for you, and then at that point, Koda tries to, fight back against this guy, not, physically fighting back, but, talking to him and saying, why are you taking this, these belong to the museum, Kendall's even fighting back against this, and this is all, vocally speaking out against the prince and the service, the group of people that are there to help him. So what happens is that then they end up leaving with in their limos, and because it is the royalties' property, they just let them leave at first. In the meantime, though, we suddenly see some Vivixes are sneaking around, and we know at that point that the Vivixes and Fury and some other enemies are probably going to mess around with the prince. So at that point, we see some spaceships coming down, all original footage, shooting at the limos and everything. And at that point, they eventually get out of their limos in fear of what might happen to them if they just kept on going with all this. And at that point, they end up seeing, Fury, Poisandra, Curio, Wrench, all a bunch of Vivixes and some other enemies, all there, and they're all trying to get the gold energem as well as steal the treasures of Xandar. So at that point, Fury is threatening to basically kill the prince if he doesn't give him the gold energem, which the prince has no idea what the gold energem is because he thinks it's the stone of Xandar. If he said that, he would know. Anyway, so at that point he's very confused, and suddenly from out of nowhere, while he's being threatened to be killed if he doesn't give it, suddenly the Rangers come to the prince's rescue and begin to fight all the different enemies and stuff. And Coda in particular tries to protect the prince because of the fact that he doesn't want him to get hurt, and eventually he manages to save the prince, and the prince then feels really bad for saying mean things to him, which he said things along the lines of you're not wearing any shoes, where are you, a caveman, how dare you look this way, or he basically treats him very poorly before, and now he regrets it because he's like, you saved me and yet I treated you so terribly. And basically Coda talks right back to him in a very funny way, but in a very realistic way, and it's said so well about how it's I will protect you, and sometimes there's good in everyone. You're not the nicest person yourself, so I'm sure there's good in you too. He basically says something like that. One's you're not that nice, but you know what? I'm sure there's good in you. So that's all. I mean, it's something along those lines. Anyway, he begins to realize that man, there's maybe I should really think about my actions and everything. So eventually, there's more fight scenes. Fury's trying to look for the gold energem, even more so. There's attacks going on, and at one point, when the prince is almost attacked again, the other Rangers that aren't Coda end up trying to attack Fury, and at that point, Fury, rather than trying to kill the prince again, escapes with the gold energem and runs off. And at that point, it's up in the air as to what was going to happen. We know that he has it. We then hear from Kendall, who apparently says that she has been developing another energem to deal with the Terrorzord, which is great, obviously. So at that point, we see Fury and all the other enemies stealing treasures, getting the gold energem and all that, and talking to each other, when suddenly the Rangers come in and they all morph. And they morph right in front of the villains as well as in front of the prince, even though they actually tell the prince to leave and get away so that you can get to safety. The prince is very curious at this point. He wants to know more. He wants to understand what's there. Why are they fighting these guys? Why are they pursuing these villains? Why does it matter? And so he's curious. So he eventually sees they're Rangers, and that's a huge deal at that point because now he knows their identity as Rangers. So anyway, at that point, it's it's obviously a big deal to him. But following this, right after it, Fury's okay, well now I'm going to summon the Terrorzord, and so he summons it. And at that point, Tyler, being absent at the time, shows up out of nowhere, firing a blast from his gun on top of his T-Rex Zord, and then suddenly, with the Terrorzord up in the sky really high, with the Terrorzord up in the sky really high, then at that point, Tyler decides to use the new Energem that Kendall gave him. And this is a very unusual, but it makes a lot of sense, Energem. And you may wonder, what does that mean? So the Energem basically makes it so that the T-Rex Zord can stretch its neck out really, really high, and basically he goes from T-Rex to giraffe. I mean, his neck stretches out so high that he basically like is able to just he's right next to the Pterosaur, and the T-Rex Megazord is able. The T-Rex Zord is able to chomp on the Pterosaur and take it down. So that happens, and it does help. Following this, though, at one point, I'm trying to remember now what happened then. Following this, we see the Rangers trying to deal with what do you call it? The Rangers try to deal with some of the villains, and at one point even Coda and Riley combine their weapons to fight off against Poisandra and Curio and some of the other enemies, and it's a huge deal. And eventually, Tyler and Fury, like they've been doing for a good number of episodes now, consecutively, they get into a fighting stance and they're ready to fight each other. And then suddenly, this time when Tyler's like, hand over the gold energy, he's like, no, I'm not going to do it or whatever. And then at that point, as you've noticed, there's always that glowing energy that seems to be a person. So at that point, Tyler thinks, maybe I'll see my dad. And suddenly, what happens is that glowing force begins to start coming out, and it starts to actually form a person. We start to see a person coming forth, and then a massive blast of energy shoots across the screen. At that point, all the Rangers demorph, and we suddenly see what the figure was. And at that point, he's still not sure if it was his father, but then Tyler goes over to check if it really is his father or not, and he sees it's not his father. And then we realize the figure was actually Ivan. And one thing I forgot to mention, and this was about back when he was about Fury when he was about to almost attack the prince, and this is something I probably should have said already, but I didn't, sadly, was the fact that he said, after 800 years, I finally have the gold energy, which at that point the prince realized, wait, you must have been the monster that attacked Sir Ivan and the prince. And he's like, yeah, I was, and it's true. So Fury was that monster that attacked the prince and the knight all the way back when. So here it makes complete sense as to why, so as you can guess, somehow he went through him. Now, it's not very clear exactly what he did to put him inside of him or how that even worked, but anyway, he was prisoner to him. So anyway, he's out at that point, and we see that he's easily able to then use his morpher. Sir Ivan is able to then use his morpher, and this is Sir Ivan, remember that. Ivan, I'm just going to call him Ivan at this point. Ivan comes out, and we see him, and instantly gets ready to access his morpher. He has the gold energy at this point for some reason already, and then he transforms into the Gold Ranger. So everyone's in shock, of course, because it's just like, what? There's another Ranger. We have the Gold Ranger, so it's a huge, huge deal. And at that point, it's a little bit weird. I'll mention what I think about this point in a second. A little bit. So what happens is at this point, he begins to show off to everyone like what he can do as a ranger. So he's morphed and everything. So he starts to just do his regular attacks. He starts to show that he can do aerial combat, meaning that he can jump and like kind of glide for short distances and attack enemies and do very, very quick attacks. And he eventually shows the Terror Saber as well, which he shows off some of the attacks. He doesn't show off like the different modes, like the 3 different levels, like Kuro Gold does. I'm sure they might add that in the future or for like the next episode, or maybe they did and I didn't really think about it, or they didn't explicitly say it as levels. But regardless, they did use the saber. There was some cool thunder effects done, and it was done really well. And this was eventually followed by Sledge getting really, really angry about how like all of his work is being destroyed, how Fury was let this being escape from him and all that. And at that point, Fury, at that point, Magna, what am I saying? Sledge is like, fire the Magna beams, because eventually he destroys two of like the more advanced soldiers, and then Sledge decides to make the two monsters grow big. So at that point, thinking, okay, it's big, and he knowing that the Terrorzord, that he can control the Terrorzord, he decides at that point to use it to fight the enemies. Now at that point, it's a little confusing, because you think to yourself, wait, it's evil. So the thing is that because of he has a good heart, unlike Fury, he was able to overpower the evil inside the Terrorzord and take back control over it. And at that point, he shows off all the awesome powers of the Terror Charged Megazord, and he manages to easily destroy the two massive enemies in a very short amount of time. So all that's good. Eventually, following this, we end up seeing the Rangers talking to him and thanking him for what he did, and explaining and welcoming him to the present day time, and they all greet him. And he's not really focused on them, because they're not royalty. He doesn't have to report to them, and there's nothing that he has to think about at this point. So eventually, though, the prince comes over, having seen him and knowing that he is Sir Ivan. Ivan actually bows to him, and Ivan actually realizes that, oh my god, this is the current day prince, so I must, bow down to him and respect him and do my honor for the country of Xandar. So at that point, he bows to him. He says, "I will give you my gold energem, and you may do what you want with it, and I will listen to you, as I know you are of the royal throne." So at that point, he's like, "Well, thank you for the son of Xandar." And the thing is that also Ivan thinks of it as the son of Xandar, but we eventually find. But then the Rangers explain to him that. Explain to the prince and to Ivan their mission, the Rangers' mission, about how they have 5 energems, and they show that this is not something unique. There are others, and they explain that there are 10 energems in total, and they currently have 5, and that is the 6th energem. And at that point, the prince is like, "Well, I think that you've shown that you can do a lot of good for us as a knight." As a ranger, and I think that you should have this energem and use it well. And he's like, "I will do well by the kingdom of Xandar." And so at that point, he goes off with the gold energem, and the prince thanks them and thanks Sir Ivan, and just at that point leaves. And the thing is that Shelby especially is pushing for Ivan to join them, because she's a girl, and she likes to, and it's not even that she's a girl, just in general, she wants him to join them, because more Rangers, they have a better chance against Sledge and Fury and everyone else. So now, that's about it. So then at that point, they basically let him go, they let Ivan go. Ivan goes off on his own, doesn't join them at that point, although he should pretty soon, if not even the next episode, because in the actual Japanese show, he does. We'll see. Anyway, that's about it for this episode. Now, I do want to talk about a few things. I did mention that Prince Philip is supposedly going to become the Graphite Ranger. That's supposed to happen in the next couple of episodes, 2 or 3 episodes, because they're trying to push things and make things faster, as you might know. So that's going to be interesting. Another thing to note is the fact that when Fury separated from Ivan, it wasn't like if you know the Sentai, this is for Sentai fans especially, in the Sentai, he was a whole entire he was made from a mask, and this was all sorts of armor that went around the being that he trapped inside of him. In this case, they didn't do that whole entire armor effect. They did it where he was a spirit inside of him that could just come separate from him, which means that they might somehow, which I don't know how, make it so that he's used again. Now, what I could see them also somehow doing is possibly as you may have noticed, they've given Fury several, like they always say, like with a lot of the villains, like, I've given you this many chances, now I must kill you or something, or now I must destroy you. So what I'm guessing might happen, I'm not saying for sure this is definite, but what I could see happening is that they might decide to, maybe in the next episode or so, because usually when a villain like loses their power, like when an evil force loses their power over a good force, usually the follow-up episode tends to be the one where they destroy the evil force that was controlling them, and then they join the side of good for real. So what I'm expecting is something along those lines for the next episode. I don't know for a fact that that's true, but I could see that being a big possibility. So it's interesting to note. Also, as I mentioned, yes, there is that mask aspect. So what I'm guessing is they'll probably do that because, he only had so many episodes in the actual show where you could actually use him. So they're not just going to like make him this mysterious character that disappears. They're going to have to give some explanation. So, because currently speaking, like, there's not much extra that he has until like towards the very end of the season. If you've watched the Japanese show, like, that there's not that much left of chaos footage. Chaos is the Japanese name for Fury. No, it's not. The Gold is. Sorry, the Gold. The Chaos is another enemy, which I hope actually appears soon. Anyway, I'm curious as to what they'll do from this. The other point that I wanted to mention was the fact that what was it again? There's one other point that I wanted to mention about this. They never show. There's one other point about this that I wanted to mention. I'm actually forgetting it right now just because of the fact that I'm not sure. But the thing is that the Ranger is that, like, that whole entire aspect of his personality. That's what it was. Okay, sorry. I was trying to remember now, and my computer like has stopped letting me access all my information that I was going to put up. The thing is that his personality. So I wanted to also talk about his personality a little bit because I've talked about the two other big things. His personality. He's very, very much so like I am part of royalty. He has a very like I have an English accent or something like that. Like he has that like proper accent and it's interesting. I do like how he looks. I think that he's an interesting character. I'm very curious as to how they will go further with him and possibly what things they'll expand with him. And just in general, it's really good. So anyway, this has been Crazy Samurai 71. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. So bye.